I really want you to think back for a second to a very specific feeling from when you were younger.
Oh, wow. Okay. Going way
Yeah,
back.
way back.
Duh.
Try to remember the exact physical sensation of the final school bell ringing at the end of the day. Do you remember that?
Oh, absolutely. It's visceral.
Right. You got this heavy backpack slung over one shoulder. You were walking out through those double doors. And, I mean, maybe it was a really rough day.
Yeah, maybe there was some hallway drama, or, maybe someone said something incredibly cruel to you in the cafeteria.
Exactly. Or you just felt completely ostracized by your friend group.
Yeah.
But the moment you heard that shrill ringing of the bell and you stepped onto the yellow school bus,
Or you finally turn the knob and walk through your own front door at home.
yes, there was this undeniable physical boundary. You were safe.
It was a geographical sanctuary. I mean, the bullying, the social pressure, the intense, suffocating hierarchy of the schoolyard, it all had a physical limit.
It literally stopped at your property line.
It did. You
Yeah.
could go to your bedroom, shut the door, throw your bag on the floor, listen to some music, and actually decompress.
You could just breathe for a minute.
Right. The threat was left in a brick building miles away, locked up until 8 in the morning the next day.
Exactly. You could actually breathe. The nervous system could reset itself. But when you look at the reality of today, that bell, it doesn't mean anything anymore.
No, it's completely obsolete.
That geographical sanctuary has been completely demolished. And that jarring reality is exactly what we are focusing on today in this deep dive.
It's a heavy one, but so necessary.
It really is. We are looking at a topic that touches almost every single person listening to this, whether you realize the extent of it or not. We're talking about cyberbullying.
But we aren't just going to look at the dark side of this, right?
No, absolutely not. We aren't going to sit around wringing our hands about the state of the internet. Today is specifically about protection, prevention, and reclaiming power in a 247 digital world.
Which is why we're calling this focus Own Your Power.
Yes, own your power, because it is incredibly necessary right now. The landscape has shifted so radically under our feet that most of us are still trying to navigate it with severely outdated maps.
We really are. We are applying 20th century coping mechanisms to a 21st century psychological crisis.
Like telling kids to just walk away or, sticks and stones.
Exactly. It simply does not compute anymore. The environment is completely different.
Okay, so let's unpack this. To build a new map for you today, we've pulled together a massive stack of research.
We have a lot to get through.
We really do. We're synthesizing the latest statistical data on the scope of digital harassment, along with a really comprehensive tactical playbook on dealing with digital threats.
And there's also a deeply fascinating psychological analysis we're pulling from titled No Escape: Bullying Online and Offline.
Yeah, that paper is incredible. And the mission here is deeply practical. We want to help you navigate this modern minefield.
Because whether you are a parent desperately trying to protect your kids from something you never had to deal with at their age,
Or you are an adult dealing with relentless workplace harassment on Slack or email.
right, or you just want to understand the psychological architecture of our digital lives, we are going to equip you with actionable tools and some pretty profound insights into how all of this works under the hood.
And to really understand what's happening under the hood, we first have to completely shatter this lingering, stubborn misconception that what happens online is just, kids being kids.
That phrase drives me crazy.
Same. Or the idea that a digital attack is somehow less real than a physical shove into a locker.
That trivialization is honestly one of the biggest hurdles we face in addressing the problem. When researchers study this, they define cyberbullying as willful and repeated harm inflicted through the use of computers, cell phones, and other electronic devices.
But I mean, that clinical definition masks a massive, agonizing spectrum of human behavior.
It really does. It sounds so sterile on paper.
Right, because we aren't just talking about someone leaving a mean comment on a photo. We are talking about highly coordinated social exclusion.
We are talking about doxing.
Yes, explain that real quick for anyone who doesn't know the term.
So doxing is the malicious excavation and publishing of someone's private information, like their home address, their phone number, or their family members' details.
And the goal there is specifically to invite a wider mob to harass them, right?
Exactly. It's weaponizing the internet against one person. It also includes complex impersonation, where someone creates fake profiles to systematically humiliate someone else.
And the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, which is just It's designed to utterly destroy a person's reputation in seconds.
And when you look at the sheer scale of this, it is breathtaking.
The numbers are wild.
They really are. The Pew Research Center data from 2022 shows that 46% of U.S. teens ages 13 to 17 have experienced at least one form of cyberbullying.
Almost half. That is just staggering.
And the Cyberbullying Research Center's own massive national study corroborates this almost exactly. They put lifetime victimization at 46.5%.
So it's not a fluke in the data.
No, not at all. What's fascinating here is the sheer consistency of those numbers across different independent studies. We are constantly hovering right around that 46 to 47% mark.
So if you visualize a typical high school classroom of 30 kids, nearly 15 of them have been targeted.
Exactly. It is no longer an anomaly. It is a normalized, systemic feature of adolescent culture.
But it's not just adolescent culture. And this is the part that I think is going to shock a lot of people listening.
Oh, definitely.
The Anti-Defamation League released a massive report recently on online hate and harassment, and they found that 52% of adults in the United States have experienced online harassment in their lifetime.
More than half of all adults.
Right. We have this cultural blind spot where we think cyberbullying is something you age out of when you graduate high school.
We think of it as a maturity issue, like, oh, teenagers are just dramatic. But it's not. It's an environment issue.
So it's the platforms themselves.
Well, it's that adult harassment is fundamentally the same psychological mechanism as teen bullying, just with different stakes and dressed up in different costumes.
Okay, that makes sense.
The human drive to dominate, to exclude, and to humiliate outgroup members doesn't magically evaporate when you turn 18. It just adapts to adult environments.
So instead of a high school group chat where someone is being mocked, what does it look like?
It's a neighborhood Facebook group where an adult is being socially ostracized over a petty local dispute.
Oh man, neighborhood groups are notorious for that.
They really are. Or instead of a locker room, it's a corporate email chain. It's a professional networking site like LinkedIn or a company Slack channel.
Where passive-aggressive bullying, exclusion from crucial communications, or outright defamation is taking place.
Exactly. The playground just became the office.
And the vectors for this cruelty have evolved so incredibly fast. It feels like we're constantly fighting the last war,
We are absolutely always a step behind the technology.
It's not just a cool text message anymore. The threat has mutated. We are dealing with AI-generated content now.
Deepfakes.
Right, deepfakes, where someone's face is flawlessly superimposed onto compromising material. And the victim has to somehow prove to their family or their employer that it isn't real.
Which is almost impossible to do once it goes viral.
We are also dealing with anonymous messaging apps that sweep through middle schools, practically designed from the ground up to facilitate consequence-free cruelty.
And we are seeing massive amounts of highly organized harassment in online gaming chats, too.
Like on Discord servers or Twitch streams. It really feels like we've built this massive, sprawling digital city, gleaming and futuristic, but we completely forgot to install streetlights or hire a police force.
That is a perfect analogy.
We just threw billions of people into it and said, good luck. So what does this all mean for the citizens living in it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, your analogy of the digital city without streetlights perfectly captures the evolutionary mismatch we are experiencing.
Evolutionary mismatch. What does that mean in this context?
Well, the evolution of our technology, specifically the unprecedented speed, the global reach, and the engineered anonymity of it, has vastly outpaced our social and neurological evolution.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think about it from a biological perspective. Human beings evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to manage social conflicts in very small, face-to-face groups.
Right, like small tribes.
Exactly. In a hunter-gatherer tribe, there were immediate physical and social consequences for bad behavior. If you were wantonly cruel to someone in your tribe, you risked being cast out.
And being cast out meant you wouldn't survive the winter. You'd literally die.
Exactly. So our brains literally wired themselves to require social cohesion for survival. We have a biological imperative to care about our reputation.
We have thousands of years of social conditioning built around looking someone in the eye when we speak to them.
Right. Reading their facial expressions and modulating our behavior based on their pain response.
If you see someone cry, you naturally back off. Usually.
Yes. Now, almost overnight, in evolutionary terms, we've stripped away the eye contact. We've stripped away the immediate social consequences.
We've handed people tools of mass communication.
And we haven't developed the psychological or societal infrastructure to handle the environment we've created.
Which perfectly sets up the skeptic's favorite argument. You hear this all the time from people who haven't experienced it.
Well, the just log off crowd.
Exactly. Just log off, just close your laptop, put the phone in a drawer. They argue that because it's happening on a screen, it's easily avoidable.
It's such a frustrating perspective.
But looking through the research on the architecture of these platforms, that just log off advice seems not just unhelpful, but fundamentally ignorant of how modern life actually works.
It entirely misunderstands the architecture of the modern digital trap.
Let's talk about that architecture.
The psychological analysis in our research stack points to 5 distinct structural elements, let's call them the pillars of the architecture, that make digital cruelty uniquely devastating.
Okay, 5 pillars.
These elements explain exactly why a cruel comment online fundamentally breaks the human brain in a way that an in-person insult does not.
Let's break those down, because understanding the structure of the trap is the only way to dismantle it for our listeners.
Absolutely.
The first major concept they highlight is permanence, the anxiety of the archive.
This is a huge one. In the physical world, if someone insults you in the hallway, the sound waves dissipate. The words disappear into the air.
The emotional pain remains, sure, but the event itself is over. It is locked in the past. But online,
Online, it is a permanent, searchable record. Once something is posted, a humiliating photo, a vicious rumor, an out-of-context quote, it can be screenshotted, downloaded, shared, and archived indefinitely.
across countless servers, you can't just throw it away.
Right. A single fleeting moment of intense humiliation becomes a digital tattoo. And for the victim, this creates a persistent, terrifying baseline of anxiety.
Because they know it's always out there.
They know that the embarrassing moment is just lying dormant. It's a landmine waiting to resurface years later when they apply for college, when they go for a job interview, or when they try to date someone new.
You can't ever outrun it. You can't start over.
No, you really can't.
And that feeds directly into the second architectural element, audience.
The scale is what makes this so unprecedented.
The sheer scale is terrifying. Traditional bullying might have 5 to 10 witnesses, a circle of kids pointing and laughing on the playground. And that is awful, don't get me wrong.
It's terrible, but it's contained. A cyberbullying incident, it can reach tens of thousands or even millions within hours.
Because of how the platforms are built.
Exactly. The algorithms actually incentivize virality. So if a piece of content is controversial or cruel, the platform pushes it to more people.
Because people engage with outrage.
Right. The trauma is amplified exponentially. You aren't just being humiliated in front of your immediate peers. You are being humiliated on a global stage.
And human neurology simply cannot process that level of social rejection.
It really can't. As we mentioned, our brains are wired for a Dunbar's number of social connections, maybe 150 people.
So when your brain perceives that you have been ostracized by an audience of thousands,
The physiological panic response is apocalyptic. Your brain interprets it as an absolute threat to your survival.
and the people delivering that humiliation don't even have to show their faces or own their words, which brings us to the third element, anonymity.
This is where the psychology gets incredibly dark.
The research heavily references psychologist John Sealer's foundational work from 2004 on the online disinhibition effect.
Yes, Seuler's concept is basically the skeleton key to understanding digital cruelty.
Explain how that works.
The online disinhibition effect explains the psychological mechanism of why people act so much worse online than they ever would in person. When cyberbullies can hide behind fake accounts, pseudonyms, and cartoon avatars, they experience a profound, almost instantaneous reduction in empathy.
The anonymity acts as a psychological shield.
Exactly. It removes the social risk of being identified, which essentially turns off the brain's behavioral brakes.
So they don't feel the consequences.
They don't have to witness the tears, they don't see the victim's shoulder slump, they don't hear the voice crack. They are entirely insulated from the human cost of their actions. They're just pressing keys on a keyboard.
I always wonder about this, though, and I want to push back on the prevailing narrative a bit.
Okay, sure.
Does the mask of an anonymous username actually change human nature? Like, does it turn a good person into a monster, or does it just reveal who they truly are when you remove the threat of consequences?
That is the big question. Are we all just one fake account away from being vicious?
Right. What does the psychology say?
It raises a profound philosophical and psychological question. The psychological consensus leans toward the idea that the medium itself changes the behavior.
Really? So the tech makes us worse?
We are highly contextual creatures.
Hmm.
Our morality is deeply tied to our environment. When you remove accountability, you lower the threshold for cruelty significantly.
That makes sense.
Solar pointed out that anonymity creates a dissociative state. The person bullying literally feels like their online persona is a completely different entity from their real-world self.
Oh, wow. So they compartmentalize the behavior.
Yes, they tell themselves, that wasn't really me, that was just my gaming avatar, it's just trash talk. It allows normal, otherwise polite individuals to participate in devastating mob harassment without feeling personal guilt or cognitive dissonance.
Because the architecture of the platform enables the dissociation,
Exactly.
which is terrifying because the victim does not get to dissociate.
Oh, not at all.
The victim doesn't experience it as an avatar taking damage.
Mm.
They experience it as very, very real psychological pain. And they experience it constantly, which is the fourth element, 2147 access.
The no escape factor. This goes right back to our opening hook about the school bell.
The total and complete loss of sanctuary. The harassment follows victims into their living rooms, into their bedrooms, into their most intimate and vulnerable spaces.
Direct messages, social media tags, relentless group chats. The phone buzzes on the nightstand at 2 in the morning, illuminating the dark room, and the victim knows another attack has landed.
The threat is literally sleeping next to them on the pillow.
It is. It never turns off.
It's like being forced to carry a megaphone that broadcasts your worst moments and your worst enemy's voices directly into your pocket all day and all night.
You can't even sit down to eat dinner with your family without the potential of the megaphone going off.
And the final element that compounds all of this is the lack of nonverbal cues.
This is crucial because the vast majority of human communication is nonverbal.
We rely heavily on tone of voice, a slight smile, a softening of the eyes, body posture to convey intent.
Right. When you strip all of that away and rely solely on flat text, human beings default to a negativity bias.
Meaning we assume the worst.
Exactly. As a survival mechanism, we tend to read ambiguous text in the worst, most threatening tone possible.
Which means that even minor misunderstandings can escalate rapidly into massive conflicts.
And intentional targeted bullying is received with maximum hostility, stripped of any mitigating humanity.
So when you take all of these architectural elements together, the permanence of the digital archive, the terrifying scale of the audience, the dissociative cruelty of anonymity, the 247-bedroom invasion, and the inherent negativity bias of text.
You completely understand why a recent study highlighted in our research found that 67% of teens explicitly state that cyberbullying is worse than in-person bullying.
67%. That's huge. What was their main reason?
The exact quote from the teens in the study was, because you can never get away from it.
You can never get away from it. That sentiment is just, it's heartbreaking.
It really is.
And it's the perfect transition from analyzing the mechanics of the tech platforms to understanding the biological reality of what is happening inside the human body.
Because when you fundamentally believe you can never get away from a threat, your biology reacts exactly as if you are being hunted.
So let's talk about the physical body. Let's talk about the brain on the 247 threat.
It's a biological crisis.
Right, because we often culturally treat bullying as merely an emotional issue. We say, oh, their feelings are hurt, they need to toughen up.
Which is completely the wrong way to look at it.
But reading through these medical journals, they make it explicitly, undeniably clear that this is a physiological trauma response. What exactly happens when the human brain never gets to switch off?
It is entirely biological. Humans, like all mammals, require spaces of absolute safety to regulate our nervous systems.
That reset we talked about earlier.
Yes. When we encounter a threat, whether it's a tiger in the brush or a threatening text message, our amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, sounds a massive alarm.
And what happens physically?
Our bodies instantly flood with cortisol and adrenaline. This is the classic fight or flight response. It increases your heart rate, dilates your pupils, and shuts down non-essential systems like digestion.
So you can funnel all your energy into your muscles to run away or fight.
Exactly. But the crucial design feature of this system is that it's supposed to be temporary. You run away, you survive, the threat passes, and your cortisol levels drop back to a normal baseline.
But with cyberbullying, because of that 247 access, because the phone is in your pocket, the predator is always with you.
The threat never passes.
So what happens to the brain?
The brain is trapped in a perpetual state of fight or flight. The cortisol never clears from the bloodstream. And chronic, unrelenting cortisol is incredibly toxic to the body.
It's literally poisoning them with stress.
Yes. This state of chronic stress leads directly to deep physiological burnout. The body is essentially redlining its engine all day and all night.
Which has to lead to physical symptoms.
Profound physical exhaustion, compromised immune systems, and critically, the total destruction of sleep architecture.
Because they can't turn off enough to rest.
Victims are lying awake, their nervous systems vibrating, anticipating what might be posted about them while they are unconscious. And without deep REM sleep, the brain cannot process emotion.
So the emotional regulation collapses entirely.
Completely collapses.
And as that profound physical and emotional exhaustion sets in, there's a psychological phenomenon that the research highlights, which I think is one of the most dangerous concepts we'll discuss today.
You're talking about learned helplessness.
Yes, learned helplessness. Can you really unpack how that works and why it's so uniquely triggered by the digital environment?
Learned helplessness is a foundational concept in psychology. It was originally discovered by Dr. Martin Seligman in the late 1960s.
Okay, tell us about the origin of it.
He was conducting experiments with dogs, and he found that if an animal is repeatedly subjected to an unavoidable negative stimulus, in his case, mild electrical shocks, and they learn that nothing they do can stop the shock.
I just give up.
Eventually, they will just stop trying. Even when the researchers later presented an obvious opportunity to escape, the dogs would just lie down and accept the shock.
That is so sad.
The animal had cognitively learned that it was helpless.
The cognitive shift went from, I need to find a way out, to there is no way out, so why try?
Exactly. Now, map that neurology onto a human being facing relentless digital bullying.
Oh, man.
When a teenager or an adult feels they cannot escape the harassment because they bravely block one account and 3 more anonymous burner accounts instantly pop up.
Or because the humiliating rumor spreads across 5 different apps faster than they can possibly report it.
Right. They internalize the core belief that resistance is futile. They stop trying to defend themselves. They withdraw entirely from social interaction.
And what does that state do to a person long term?
This state of learned helplessness is not just sadness. It is one of the strongest neurological predictors of clinical depression and suicidal ideation. The brain essentially gives up on survival.
And the data backing this up is incredibly grim, but we have to look at it to understand the stakes.
We can't ignore the numbers.
A major meta-analysis published in JAMA Pediatrics, which is a massive, rigorous review of multiple independent studies, found a direct, highly significant link between cyberbullying victimization and higher odds of self-harm and suicidal ideation.
It's not a loose correlation.
No, it is a profound biological risk factor. But there was another study in this stack that absolutely stopped me in my tracks. It made me rethink everything about the long-term timeline of this trauma.
You're referring to the King's College London study.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly terrifying.
It's a landmark piece of research.
This is a longitudinal study published in the American Journal of Psychiatry. They tracked a cohort of people over decades, and they found that the mental health, the physical health, and even the economic effects of childhood bullying were still highly detectable up to 40 years later.
40 years.
40 years. We were talking about a half-century echo from a childhood event. A 13-year-old gets relentlessly bullied online, and at 53 years old, they are still experiencing higher rates of clinical depression, severe anxiety disorders, and lower economic standing specifically tied to that childhood trauma.
It sounds impossible, but it's true.
How is that biologically possible? I mean, how does an insult at 13 cost you a promotion at 50?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of neurobiology and human development, it makes complete sense, as devastating as it is. We have to remember that adolescence is a period of massive, foundational neurological remodeling.
The brain is basically under construction.
Highly plastic. It is pruning synapses and literally wiring its white matter based on the environment it finds itself in.
So if a brain is marinating in a toxic soup of chronic stress hormones,
That constant, unending cortisol we talked about.
right, during those critical developmental years, it physically alters how the brain develops.
It actually changes the physical structure of the amygdala and the hippocampus.
So it's not just a bad memory, it's a structural change to the hardware.
Precisely. It permanently alters how the individual forms attachment patterns with other human beings. It fundamentally warps their self-concept.
Because their baseline assumption becomes what?
Their baseline assumption, baked into their neural pathways, becomes that the world is inherently hostile, that peers are dangerous, and that they are essentially unworthy of protection.
And that underlying architecture doesn't just evaporate when they get their high school diploma.
No, it influences every romantic relationship they try to build, how they handle conflict with a spouse.
How they negotiate for a salary, how they advocate for themselves in a corporate meeting.
Exactly. They are operating an adult life on an operating system that was corrupted by trauma at age 13. It casts a massive shadow over their entire adult trajectory.
And speaking of adult life, the adult impact happening right now in the present is just as visceral.
Workplace bullying is a massive issue.
The Workplace Bullying Institute recently linked workplace cyberbullying, the relentless after-hours emails demanding immediate responses, the deliberate exclusion from crucial Slack channels, the subtle digital undermining on shared documents. They linked this directly to PTSD symptoms.
PTSD, chronic insomnia, and massive professional deterioration.
So whether you are 14 trying to survive middle school or 44 trying to survive a toxic corporate culture, the human brain simply cannot sustain constant digital hostility.
It breaks down. The physiological hardware simply isn't designed for an environment of unending threat.
Knowing that the psychological and biological toll is this devastating, and that the stakes are this high, literally altering brain development, destroying sleep architecture, and predicting self-harm early intervention becomes the absolute most critical thing in the world.
We have to stop the marinating process as early as possible.
But here's the massive roadblock we run into. How do you intervene if the victim is hiding it?
This is the tricky part.
Because the data clearly shows that the vast majority of them are suffering in total secrecy.
This is what researchers call the silence gap, and it is arguably the most dangerous aspect of the entire cyberbullying epidemic.
Just how big is this gap?
Researchers Pachin and Hinduja found that fewer than half of cyberbullied teens ever tell a parent or a trusted adult. The federal resources at stopbullying.gov confirm the exact same trend.
The majority suffer in absolute agonizing silence. But why? I really want to dig into this. If you are in that much pain and you have that megaphone in your pocket, shouting at you 24/7, keeping you awake, giving you stomach aches,
You'd think they'd run for help.
why wouldn't you go to the person whose literal job it is to protect you? Why wouldn't a teenager run to their parents?
There are a few deeply rooted psychological barriers. First is the profound sense of shame.
Because they feel like it's their fault.
Bullying is intentionally designed to make the victim feel fundamentally defective. To admit you are being bullied is, in the victim's mind, to admit that the bullies are right, that there is something inherently wrong, weird, or unlovable about you.
That's heartbreaking. What's the second barrier?
Second is the fear of escalation. They are terrified that if a parent gets involved, if a parent marches into the school principal's office or aggressively confronts the bully's parents,
It's going to get worse for them.
it breaks the unwritten social code. The bullying will mutate, become more covert, and get exponentially worse.
I can see that happening.
But the third reason, and perhaps the most common reason for digital natives, is what we might call the amputation paradox.
The amputation paradox. What do you mean by that?
For a teenager today, their device is not just a phone. It is their entire social lifeline. It is the town square, the mall, the passing notes in class. It is how they connect to the entirety of their peer group.
It's their whole world.
They know that a parent's first instinct, often out of deep love and a desperate desire to protect them, is to say, "Give me the phone. We're deleting Instagram. We're deleting Snapchat. You're off social media."
From the parent's perspective, they are neutralizing the threat.
Yeah.
They are taking the hand off the hot stove.
Exactly. The parent thinks they are surgically removing the tumor, but to the teenager, the parent has just amputated their entire social world.
Oh, wow.
They have essentially sentenced them to total social isolation. So the teenager calculates the risk in their head. I will silently endure the cyberbullying, as awful as it is, because telling my parents guarantees social death.
It guarantees I will be cut off from my actual friends, too. Wow. That puts it into such a sharp, heartbreaking perspective. So if they aren't going to tell you because of the amputation paradox, the burden shifts entirely to the observer.
It's on us to see it.
If you are a parent, a teacher, a partner, or a friend, you have to become an expert at spotting the unseen. You have to look for the silent red flags.
And the psychological research provides a very specific framework for what to watch for.
And the key concept here is not just looking for sadness, but looking for deviations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Proactive observation of baseline behavior. You're looking for sudden, unexplained device avoidance, or conversely, A visceral, emotional upset immediately following screen time.
Give me an example of what that looks like in the house.
If your child suddenly tosses their phone onto the couch like it burned them and walks out of the room looking highly agitated, or if an adult partner suddenly slams their laptop shut, their jaw is clenched, and they seem highly anxious for no apparent reason.
What else should we be looking for?
Other signs include a sudden, intense secrecy regarding their devices, minimizing tabs when you walk into the room, creating new accounts out of nowhere, or abruptly deleting long-standing social media profiles without any explanation.
And physical changes too, right?
Definitely. Changes in sleep architecture, suddenly sleeping all the time to escape, or severe insomnia, changes in eating habits, a sudden, sharp decline in academic or professional performance.
And obviously, verbal cues.
Yes. The most dire warning sign, talk of feeling helpless, worthless, or expressing a desire for it to just stop.
That last one must be taken with the utmost seriousness.
Absolutely, as it is a direct linguistic indicator of potential suicidal ideation and learned helplessness.
But I want to push back on this list a little, or at least ask a really vital question on behalf of the listener.
Sure, go ahead.
If you're a parent of a teenager, a lot of what you just listed, moodiness, wanting intense privacy, changing sleep habits, maybe their grades slip one semester because the work got harder, that sounds like the stereotypical definition of simply going through puberty.
It does sound similar, yes.
How do you distinguish between typical teenage development and a flashing red siren for digital trauma? Where is the line?
It's a crucial question because you don't want to pathologize normal growing pains. The answer lies in establishing baselines and looking for clusters of symptoms.
This clusters, so not just one thing.
Right. You aren't just looking for one symptom in isolation. A teenager wanting privacy is normal. A teenager being moody is normal.
But what's not normal?
A teenager who previously loved gaming online with his friends suddenly refusing to put on his headset, claiming he feels sick to his stomach every single time the console turns on, intensely isolating himself in his room without his phone, and his grades dropping from B's to F's in 3 weeks.
Okay, that is a massive shift.
That is a sudden, sharp, clustered deviation from his specific baseline.
It's the context around the behavior, not just the behavior itself.
Plus-
And you brought up physical symptoms, like stomach aches, which the research highlights as a massive red flag. I want to dig into that because a lot of parents might dismiss a stomach ache as trying to fake sick to get out of a math test.
Which happens, but we need to look deeper.
Why does digital trauma manifest in the stomach?
It all comes back to the gut-brain axis. The brain and the gastrointestinal system are intimately biologically connected.
So they actually feel the stress in their stomach.
Yes. When the brain is flooded with chronic anxiety and cortisol from digital trauma, the body literally cannot process the emotional overload, so it somatizes it.
Somatizes it, meaning it makes it physical.
It physicalizes the emotional pain. Nausea, unexplained migraines, and severe stomach aches are the physical manifestations of a psychological crisis.
So they aren't faking it.
No, the body is literally physically rejecting the toxic environment it is being forced to endure. It's not faking it. The pain is entirely real.
Okay, so let's say you spot the deviations. You see the clustered red flags. You recognize the somatization. Or maybe the victim actually overcomes the shame and comes forward to tell you.
Then you have to act.
The trap has sprung. What happens next? Because knowing the signs is only half the battle, we need to move into the immediate defense playbook.
This is where we get tactical.
When the attack is actively happening, what exact tactical steps must you take to regain control, dismantle the threat, and actually own your power?
The psychological consensus provides a very clear, evidence-based method to regain control, and it starts with step 1, which is arguably the hardest thing to do in the modern world. Do not respond.
The framework is often called stop, block, tell.
Yes.
Yes.
And the stop means stopping yourself from reacting.
I have to interject here and really challenge this because this advice goes against every single human instinct we possess. It is agonizing.
It really is. It takes immense discipline.
If you are being publicly humiliated, if someone is spreading vicious, reputation-destroying lies about you or your child on a community forum, the ego is screaming at you to defend yourself.
Of course it is.
You want to set the record straight. You want to post the receipts. You want to fight back and show you aren't weak. If a teenager's social standing is their entire world, isn't silence perceived as weakness by their peers?
I completely understand that friction, and it's why this step is so difficult. But to understand why silence is the ultimate weapon, we have to examine the psychology of the bully.
Okay, let's look at the bully. Why are they engaging in this behavior in the first place?
They are almost always seeking a power dynamic shift. They want a reaction. They want to see tangible proof that they have successfully manipulated your emotions, caused you pain, and forced you to engage on their terms.
So any reaction is a win for them.
The anger, the defensive replies, the desperate attempts to correct the record, the digital shouting matches, that is the oxygen that fuels their fire. It validates their existence and their power.
So by reacting, even if you are factually proving them wrong, you are validating their power over your emotional state.
Precisely. By choosing not to respond, by maintaining complete, impenetrable silence, you starve them of that oxygen.
It is not an act of submission.
Not at all. It is an incredibly powerful assertion of control. You are functionally saying, your behavior does not dictate my reality, your words have no leverage over my emotions, and I absolutely refuse to participate in the script you've written.
Oh.
The victim retains all the psychological power by withholding the reaction the bully desperately craves.
That reframing is incredibly helpful. It's not passively taking the abuse. It's an active, strategic denial of their goal. It is taking your power back.
It's the strongest thing you can do.
Okay, so you've stopped yourself from responding. Step 2 in the playbook is evidence. Before you do anything else, before you hit the block button, you have to document everything.
Yes. The anxiety of the archive works both ways. You must screenshot everything.
Capture the dates, the times, the specific URLs, and the exact usernames.
And if it's on a vanishing platform like Snapchat, screenshot it, or better yet, use a secondary device to take a physical photo of the screen so the sender isn't notified.
That's a great tip. Don't let them know you're documenting it.
Exactly. Do not rely on the platform to keep the records. You need this immutable evidence if you have to escalate the situation to the school administration, to HR, or to law enforcement.
Which brings us to the next phase, block and report. Now, I don't want to just read a user manual on how to click the 3 dots on a post. Anyone can Google that.
Right, that's the mechanical part.
I want to talk about the psychological friction of this step, because reporting and blocking sound easy on paper, but the UX design of these platforms and the emotional weight of clicking that button make it highly complex.
That is a crucial distinction. The friction is immense. Platforms often bury their reporting tools under multiple submenus because, frankly, processing reports costs them money and moderation resources.
It's designed to be difficult.
It is. But beyond the UI, there is deep psychological friction for the victim. Hitting block is an act of finality.
But victims often experience intense retaliation anxiety.
They think, if I block them, will it make them angrier? Will they escalate the harassment on a different platform? Will they take it into the physical world?
And even more complicated, victims often feel a perverse need to monitor the bully's feed just to know what is being said about them.
It's hypervigilance.
Blocking cuts off their intel, which can temporarily spike their anxiety.
You feel like you're flying blind while people are shooting at you, but you have to push through that friction.
And we also have to recognize that the platform AI isn't going to save us. A lot of platforms boast about using AI to proactively detect bullying.
But algorithms are notoriously bad at detecting nuance. AI can catch a blatant swear word, but it cannot catch the devastating cruelty of an inside joke, or a subtly cropped photo, or intentional exclusion.
You have to manually report it, and you have to explicitly explain the context in the report box.
Exactly. You must advocate for yourself within the platform's ecosystem. Utilize tools like Instagram's Restrict feature, which is brilliant UX design.
How does that one work?
It allows the bully to comment, but only they can see it. It essentially puts them in a soundproof room where they think they have an audience, but they are actually shouting into the void.
I love that. It mitigates the retaliation anxiety because the bully doesn't know they've been restricted.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've stopped the reaction, we've gathered the evidence, we've pushed through the friction to block and report. The final tactical step is escalation, the tell part of stop, block, tell.
Bringing it into the light.
You have to bring this out of the digital shadows and into the physical world. You talk to a trusted adult, a counselor, or HR if it's the workplace.
Yeah.
But we also need to explicitly define when this crosses from a platform moderation issue to a legal issue.
This is critical.
When do you involve law enforcement?
It is critical to know exactly where those legal boundaries are. If the cyberbullying involves credible threats of physical violence to you or your property,
Okay, that's an obvious one.
if it involves extortion or blackmail, if it involves sexual exploitation, such as the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, often called revenge porn,
Right.
Or if it involves persistent, targeted stalking that makes you fear for your physical safety, you are no longer dealing with bullying. You are dealing with criminal offenses.
And what are the laws regarding that?
All 50 states in the U.S. have anti-bullying laws, and the vast majority have provisions that specifically cover digital harassment. You take the evidence you collected in step 2, you bypass the school or HR, and you report it directly to local police.
Do local police actually know how to handle that?
Many departments now have dedicated cybercrime units trained to trace IP addresses and handle digital forensics.
And for anyone listening who is in the middle of a crisis right now, who feels completely overwhelmed, trapped in that learned helplessness, and needs immediate support, the research highlights vital lifelines.
Yes, please utilize these.
You can text the word HOME to 741-741, which connects you to a free 247 crisis counselor via text, which is often easier than talking on the phone. Or you can call or text 988, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
Please use those resources. You do not have to fight this alone in the dark.
Surviving the immediate attack, getting out of the crisis zone, is the absolute priority. But once the immediate crisis has been managed and the nervous system is somewhat regulated, the work shifts from reactive defense to proactive fortification.
Exactly. Surviving is step 1. But how do we build long-term armor for ourselves and our kids?
We need to talk about building resilient architectures for long-term prevention. Because you can't just delete the internet, throw your phone in the ocean, and go live off the grid in the woods.
As tempting as that sounds.
As much as we might want to. You have to learn how to exist safely in the digital city. Let's look at the long-term strategies for the individual first. The research heavily recommends conducting a digital footprint audit. What does that actually mean in practice?
A digital footprint audit is a proactive defense mechanism. It means dedicating time, say every 3 months, to actively assess your vulnerabilities.
Like checking your privacy settings.
Yes. You literally Google yourself.
That
Find out what information is publicly available to anyone with a keyboard. Review the privacy settings on every single social media platform you use.
Are your posts public? Who has permission to tag you in photos? Who can send you a direct message?
Lock down your profile so that strangers cannot access your personal life. Remove your phone number and physical address from any public-facing data brokers.
The goal is to aggressively minimize the surface area that a potential attacker can target.
Absolutely.
Another crucial individual strategy is actively curating your feed and developing real media literacy. We have so much agency over what we consume, but we often act like passive recipients, just letting the algorithm spoon-feed us whatever it wants.
And we have to understand how these algorithms work. They are fundamentally designed to hijack the amygdala.
Yes, the engagement algorithms. They are optimized for one metric,
Yeah.
time on site.
And psychological research shows that nothing keeps human eyes glued to a screen longer than outrage, anger, and anxiety.
The algorithm learns that if it shows you content that makes you furious or insecure, you will stay longer.
Once you understand that mechanical manipulation, you gain power over it. If an account, a news source, or a specific influencer makes you feel chronically insecure, angry, or anxious, you must unfollow it.
Mute it, block it. Actively seek out and train the algorithm to feed you content that educates you, inspires you, or genuinely makes you laugh.
Your digital environment should be a source of psychological strength, not a constant low-level drain on your baseline self-esteem.
Well, before you contribute to that environment yourself, the playbook offers a really simple, powerful cognitive filter called the think method.
This is a great tool for kids and adults.
Before you post something, before you hit send on a comment, pause and ask yourself, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
If it fails that basic human test, delete the draft.
It applies to what you put out into the world, but it also trains your brain on how to evaluate the validity of what others are posting.
But perhaps the most vital long-term strategy for an individual has absolutely nothing to do with the internet at all.
What do you mean?
It is entirely analog. The research cites a landmark 2010 meta-analysis by Julianne Holt-Lundstad, published in PLOS Medicine.
Okay, what did she find?
This massive study proved that strong, in-person social relationships are among the most powerful protective factors for both mental and physical health.
Really? More than diet or exercise?
To put it in stark context, the researchers compared the mortality risks of profound social isolation and loneliness to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
15 cigarettes a day. That is insane.
Investing in real-world friendships, in physical community groups, in team sports, in face-to-face interactions where you actually read nonverbal cues, that builds an impenetrable psychological buffer.
When your real-world identity is strong, supported, and grounded in physical reality, a digital attack has significantly less power to destroy your core self-worth.
You know who you are because your physical community reflects it back to you.
I love that. The best defense against the digital world is a thriving physical world. But what if you are trying to build this resilient architecture for someone else? What if you are a parent trying to guide a teenager through this minefield?
The psychological guidance offers a very specific set of best practices for parents, and it starts with early check-ins. But the framing is critical.
The operative word the psychological framework uses is curiosity, not interrogation, right?
Yes. Do not wait until your child is crying in their room to talk about their digital life. Ask them about their online world the exact same way you ask them about their day at physical school or a soccer game.
What's the funniest TikTok trend right now? What game is everyone playing on Discord?
You do not need to be a technical expert on every single app, but by showing genuine, non-judgmental interest, you build the interpersonal communication bridge that they will desperately need to cross when something eventually goes wrong.
The research also heavily advocates for family digital agreements rather than unilateral dictations. I think this is brilliant from a developmental psychology standpoint.
It empowers them.
Instead of handing down the law from on high like a dictator, you will only use your phone for exactly 1 hour a day, and I will check it every night. You sit down and negotiate the rules together.
What do we think is a fair amount of screen time? What is our action plan if a stranger messages you?
When kids, especially teenagers, have a hand in creating the policy, they feel a sense of ownership, and they are vastly more likely to adhere to it.
And regarding the inevitable need to monitor their activity, the crucial advice is to monitor without surveilling.
Which is a fine line to walk.
Reading every single text message your teenager sends or demanding their passwords to read their private conversations is surveillance. It completely destroys trust, and all it does is drive their behavior underground into secret apps.
So what's the alternative?
Using tools that utilize algorithms to scan for concerning keywords related to bullying, self-harm, or predatory behavior, and only alert the parent when there is a legitimate flag that is monitoring. It balances their developmental need for privacy with your parental duty to keep them safe.
But the single most important thing for parents, and honestly, this is my favorite concept from the entire stack of research, the absolute biggest aha moment is creating a no-shame reporting culture in your house.
It's the ultimate safety net.
The rule must be explicitly stated. Safety trumps compliance. I love this concept. To use an analogy, it's like an amnesty policy.
How so?
Imagine you have a teenager who takes the family car and drives somewhere they were explicitly forbidden to go, and they get into a terrible car crash. When they call you, the parent, we deal with physical safety first.
Right, are they hurt?
Are you hurt? Are you bleeding? Do you need an ambulance? We get you to the hospital. The punishment for breaking the rules and taking the car comes way, way later, if at all. The immediate response is pure protection.
That analogy is utterly perfect because, as we discussed with the amputation paradox, the paralyzing fear of losing the device is the #1 reason kids hide cyberbullying.
Right. They think they'll be punished for being victimized.
If a teenager knows that if they come to you and say, I'm being harassed on an app you told me not to download, and they know your immediate reaction will be anger, lecturing, and the immediate confiscation of their phone,
They will never, ever tell you.
they will suffer in silence. A no-shame culture means you sit them down, look them in the eye, and say, I do not care what app you were on. I do not care if you broke our screen time agreement. If someone is hurting you online, you come to me, and you will not be in trouble.
We are an alliance. We will fix the problem together, and you will not lose your phone for telling me the truth.
That one conversation, that proactive amnesty policy, could literally save a life. It completely dismantles the power structure of the bully because the bully relies on the victim's isolation.
Exactly. It replaces terrifying isolation with an unbreakable alliance.
It really does.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started by looking at the sheer, terrifying scale of this modern digital city we've built without streetlights. The fact that nearly half of all teens and over half of adults are facing this systemic harassment.
It's a universal problem now.
We broke down the architecture of the trap, the permanent anxiety of the digital archive, the massive evolutionary mismatch of viral audiences, the dissociative mask of anonymity, the 247 access that violently invades our bedrooms, and the lack of nonverbal cues that accelerates every conflict.
And we explored the hidden biological toll, the fact that the human brain simply cannot distinguish between a physical predator and a digital mob.
leaving victims trapped in a toxic, chronic fight-or-flight response.
We broke down how that cortisol loop leads to learned helplessness, severe clinical depression, and physical symptoms like destroyed sleep and gut pain.
And we looked at the Chilling King's college data, showing how those neurological alterations can echo for up to 40 years into adulthood.
It's a lifelong shadow.
We learned how to spot the silent red flags, looking for clustered, sudden deviations in baseline behavior and physical distress. And most importantly, we went through the tactical playbook. Stop, block, tell.
Actionable steps.
We learned how to override our ego, to starve the bully of the reaction they crave, how to gather immutable evidence, how to push through the psychological friction of reporting tools, and where the legal lines are drawn.
And finally, we discussed how to build a fortress of long-term resilience through digital audits, algorithmic media literacy, strong offline connections, and establishing a no-shame amnesty culture in our homes.
The overarching message is exactly what the title of this focus implies. Own your power. The entire architecture of cyberbullying is meticulously designed to make the victim feel powerless.
It is designed to feel permanent, infinite, and inescapable, but it is an illusion.
You have the power. You can take one step. You can save one screenshot. You can push through the anxiety and block one account. You can implement a no-shame culture in your home tonight. You can reclaim one moment of physiological peace.
Yes. The walls of that digital prison can be taken down brick by brick.
But before we sign off, I know you were looking at the intersection of all these neurobiological and sociological studies, and you had a final thought that really pushes this conversation into the future.
I did, yes.
It's something that takes everything we just learned and applies it to what comes next.
It's a concept that wasn't explicitly stated in the research stack, but it's the logical and perhaps deeply unsettling conclusion of everything we've discussed today regarding brain plasticity.
Go ahead, lay it on us.
We established through the longitudinal data that childhood bullying, particularly the inescapable 247 digital kind, literally alters the physical development of the human brain. It changes attachment patterns, it suppresses empathy responses, and it permanently elevates baseline threat assessments.
Right.
Right now, we have an entire generation of digital natives, hundreds of millions of kids across the globe, whose brains are physically evolving right this very second inside this unprecedented crucible of permanence, audience, and anonymity.
They are marinating in an entirely new environment.
Exactly. My question is, what happens in 20 years? What kind of entirely new digital world will they build when they grow up to become the software engineers, the algorithm designers, and the massive tech CEOs of tomorrow?
Oh, wow.
Will their neurologically altered brains unconsciously replicate the trauma, the dissociation, and the hypervigilance they grew up with, baking those defensive mechanisms even deeper into the very code of the next iteration of the internet?
Whoa.
Or, having survived a crucible and deeply understood the pain of the trap, will they be the generation that finally figures out how to engineer empathy, friction, and genuine psychological safety directly into the infrastructure of the digital city?
Wow. That is a massive structural question to leave hanging in the air. Are we currently raising the architects of an even darker prison? Or are we raising the engineers of a future sanctuary?
You'll have to see.
That is something to really sit with and ponder. We want to encourage you to keep questioning the digital structures around you, keep auditing your environment, and keep learning how to protect yourself and the people you love.
You do not have to live at the mercy of the megaphone in your pocket.
Find your physical boundaries again. Cultivate your real-world community. Remember that feeling of the final school bell. You have the power to ring it yourself. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you on the next Deep Dive.